So we're here this morning with Mike. He is now 20 months old. I measured him this morning. He is 14.2, good size for a horse of his breeding and his age. I'm pleased with that because I want one with some size and substance, and he's showing me both those things. If you want to see the contrast, look back at a previous video called Weanlings Arrived from South Dakota that we put up a couple of months ago, and you'll see this colt and the filly that came in with him, they barely reach my waist. It's just astonishing to me how in about 14 months or so they could change that much, but they do. And in about 6 months, I'll be putting a saddle on these guys. So I'm looking forward to that. So what I wanted to talk about here is tight spots. Horses have certain places in their body where you can tell if they're troubled, you can tell if they're tense, and it's good to work on those spots, not just to loosen those spots up, but to use it almost like a relaxer for them. So where are places that you can see tension in a horse? Well, the first place that you're going to see it, and this is pretty well known and recognized, is in the mouth. You'll hear people talking about your horse is more relaxed when he licks and chews. That's true. Conversely, a lot of horses that are hard to bridle are hard to bridle because they're tense, and the tension shows in their jaw and mouth. So it's like trying to bridle a horse with lockjaw. They're tense, they're tight, they don't want to open their mouth, and pretty quick you're struggling to get their mouth open and it goes downhill from there. So you can work on using that spot as a relaxer. Use it instead of being a tense spot. Start to make it a spot that when you work with it, it's relaxing to them, it's pleasing to them. Now, I haven't done this with this colt except a little bit when I was getting ready to paste worm him. But what I'll do is I'll just take my hand there, my thumb. Remember that intradental space there. There's no teeth. That's damn sure where you want to be. And you can see what's interesting is that replicates that lick and chew because my finger's so tasty. But I'll just work my hand down there, work my hand in the corner of his mouth, and then I'll just sort of hold on to his tongue. And I may hold on until he relaxes a bit there, maybe isn't quite as active with his mouth, and then I'll take it away. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for a tight spot. Now this has been easy with him, which is reassuring. If he was tight, I would know that he was tense, that he was carrying some stress. What I used to do is, when I was working with young horses, I'd keep some grain in my pocket, and periodically I'd offer him a little bit of grain. A stressed horse just won't take it. And I'm talking about fairly stressed. But a lot of times when you're starting to saddle a colt, work with them, they are kind of stressed, and you want to know that. So you can sense that by their unwillingness to work their jaws and eat or to concentrate on something except what's causing them stress. Here, we're just trying to see if we can get to where he's comfortable with having us reach into his mouth. And what I want to do is to say, hey, don't raise your head. Put your head down a little bit. There you go. There you go. Good. Now, oddly enough, like everything else, you wouldn't think it makes a difference, but it does make a difference to go to the other side. And you can see he's a little more tense on this side. You're probably never going to bridle your horse from this side. But why not get them just as loose, just as relaxed on each side? You can see he's taking his head away from me a bit. I'm also a little more awkward on this side, so that's on me. But just get in there, rub his tongue, get down between his teeth, and it's going to make him a whole lot easier to bridle. Then the other thing I'll do in working with their mouth is I'll take the lead rope and I'll use that. It's a lot easier to slip that lead rope into their mouth than to slip a bit in. And you're going to get a little bit of that. You live with it. And I'm getting myself in an awkward place there, which I can do. Here we go. There. Well, we got sort of a mouthing rope there, you know. Do that a few times and you get your horse to where taking something in and out of their mouth is no big deal. Helps with bridling, helps with paste worming, helps with anything that you have to do. It's going to help when you get your horse's teeth done. Why not do it? It gets them over tenseness in the face, and it helps them get over that sort of global tenseness that a horse can carry. Now, this colt, I predict, is going to be a little touchy about this, and that is going to the second place that you see tension, and that's the ears. Horses are sensitive about their ears for the most part, unless they've really been imprinted early. I have mixed feelings about imprinting horses. I want them to be horses, and if they're a little bit wild, horses were born to be a little bit wild. So I'm just going to go up there, and I'm not going to go for his ears right away. That's just rude. You don't reach out like you're going to grab their ear. See, he doesn't like that. But if I go up here between his ears, he's saying, that's not so awful bad. And then I can segue over and work on the inner part of his ear. What you don't do is grab his ear like you're milking a cow and give it a big hard pull. Because two things I'll guarantee you, the horse isn't going to like it and you're not going to get any milk. So I just reach up there. And what you do, and I actually saw somebody do this with a Mustang. Brian Newbert had a video out on, you know, first catching and handling a Mustang in a demo he did. And he right away was in their mouth, he was in their ears, just to get them relaxed, to get them accepting. And what Brian Newbert said, I still remember, he said, you just want to get that ear in a good rotation. And that's kind of what you do, is you get it in a rotation. Is he going to do a little bit of that? Yeah, he may. But when he stops doing it, then I'm going to stop aggravating him. If he is wiggling around, then I'm just going to keep that rotation going. But you can see that that begins to become less of a concern to him. Now let's see if we can use that ear, see that? To drop his head. Watch. Let's see if we can use that ear to drop his head. Let's see if we can use that ear. See, he wants to raise it. I'm going to keep the rotation there and drop it. And pretty quick, you'll have your horse to where taking a hold of their ear, if anything, causes them there. He dropped, and then I moved a little too quick, and he pulled away. But they'll get to the point where rubbing on their ear causes them to drop their head, not raise it. There you go. And it's subtle like that. So you do both ears. I'm not going to do both ears, although I would predict he'd be touchier on the right generally. Next place you'll see stiffness is right here in the pole. And it's one reason why you want to work on flexing your horse and moving them around before you ride them, because if they're carrying that tension and you're trying to break it loose on a first ride and it's a new concept, it kind of works on two things at once, when really you should just be working on having a good ride. So I do a thing with colts, and if you look back at that old video, the Weanlings Arrived from South Dakota video, you'll see me start this process pretty early with these two young horses. I call this cradling. I'll take my hand and I'll put my hand around them and I'll bend that neck right there at the pole, right through the throat latch, and bring it around. And I'll wrap them around me and I'll say, you know, it's safe in there. It's okay in there. And you just do that, and that'll help break up that stiffness. It'll start the process of getting them easier to halter, easier to bridle, and easier to bend when you're on their back. And as with the ear, you can also start to suggest to them, see, he went up, let's suggest that he go down. There, he gave me some down. He's about to give me some down. Yeah, he's moving down sort of gradually, and that's okay. A lot of times they'll dip down. That's okay. See, he's staying calm. He's not taking his head away. Now, when I take my hand away, he has a tendency to sort of release himself. So I just sort of re-gripped him there and said, nah, you don't need to do that. So that's another area where you can have stiffness. So you can bend them around, get their neck broken loose. There is another area a horse can be very stiff, but you're not going to get this loose the way that I'm doing it manually. And that is right back here. Whoa, buddy. See, this colt seems quiet, but he's pretty alert, pretty aware. Right back in here, they can get pretty tight. And I'm not going to wrap my arms around him and bend him like a pretzel. That would, number one, you might get arrested. Number two, he's way too strong and it's way too awkward. So what I'll do instead, and this is something that I saw Chris Cox do, and it really works well, is I'll just look at that section and move it away from me. So this is pretty familiar to most folks. What Chris Cox does that's different, instead of locking their front end down, he asks them to move over and to move their whole rib cage away. And that softens that rib cage area and does away with some of that stiffness and tension. And that has been really a game changer for me in getting these horses to soften up. So the final place that you really often see stiffness, now you can see it obviously in their feet. And that's pretty much a whole separate category of things to work with. A horse will be hard to handle their feet sometimes just because they're tense, not because they necessarily don't like having their feet handled. But they will have a tense spot often. Hey, step up here, bud. For some reason, he was leaning on that rope, and I'd rather not start this process with him leaning. If he goes there, then he'll step up. So what you'll find, and this colt had to take his temperature. He was off his feed a month or so ago, and I realized when I went to pick up his tail to take his temperature, he about broke my arm. I mean, he clamped it down. He's strong. So I worked with him a little bit. So he's had this done some, but you want to be able to take their tail. And he's actually pretty loose today. I was hoping he'd clamp down to show you. If you find that your horse doesn't let you pick up their tail, I mean, if it feels like a bungee cord pulling against you, then you need to just move their tail around. Wiggle the dock of their tail. Work with that, and it'll take that tension out, and it'll make them easier if you have to do something. If it's a mare, if it eventually needs to be rectaled, if you're doing any kind of rectal exam on any horse, or if you're just taking a temperature, or working on a tail and you want to pick it up. You just want to get that horse to where, just like Brian Newbert said, get that tail in a good rotation. Get that tail to where it's loose. And when it gets loose, it's okay to just drop it. See, and you want it to be like that cooked spaghetti. You want it to be pretty loose, pretty soft, not have a lot of pushback. There, see, he clamped. So I'm just going to hold on until he relaxes his tail. I guarantee you, if something external stresses a horse and you're holding their tail up, they'll slam dunk you when they see something, because very often a horse's response when they're frightened is to clamp their tail and go somewhere. But now you can see he's back to being loose spaghetti. His mama was a noodle, his daddy was a snake. That's what you want. So those are some things that maybe you might not think of that are good to work with on your horse to to find those stiff spots, to work with them. It is helpful both in just loosening up those parts and in loosening up their mind overall. So I hope that's useful to you. Until next time.